You're going, Tiger.
Meet Christopher Dale Flannery, Australian tough nut, hitman and multiple murderer. He turned killing into a business, created Australia's own Murder Incorporated, and earned the nickname Rent-A-Kill. Hi, I'm Tara Moss. Welcome to Tough Nut, but with the question of what made them do it. In Tough Nuts, we'll go behind the headlines and peel away the psychological layers to discover what really made and motivated some of the most vicious thugs and killers in Australia's history. Tonight, Tough Nuts examines the dark life of Christopher Dale Flannery, Australia's most notorious hitman. Through dramatized scenes, first-hand accounts, and detailed analysis of Flannery's life, we will give a detailed portrait of the man who is believed to have killed 15 people on contract before his luck ran out and he disappeared, friendless, with ruthless enemies dispatched to kill him. His disappearance has remained a mystery for almost 3 decades, a coronial inquest lasting almost 5 years. reacted by conducting a media interview, denying all allegations.
It was being rumoured that you had been retained as a hitman.
Oh, that's incredible. Just rubbish.
You have heard these, though?
Yes, sir.
And what's your answer to that?
It's just ridiculous.
With Mark Clarkson and with Roger Wilson.
Well, Mr. Clarkson gave us some advice on a business nature to a disc detective we were having sort of trouble with. And he came to advise us, and we had a meeting, and Mr. Wilson turned up at the meeting.
Were tried in the Supreme Court in Victoria. It was, at the time, the longest trial in Victorian criminal history.
But the crucial Crown witness Deborah Boundy disappeared. She had overheard a conversation between Chris Flannery and her boyfriend Kevin Williams, describing the murder of Wilson in detail. She is believed to have been killed at Flannery's orders alone. Without her testimony, the Crown case collapsed and the three men were acquitted. Flannery was free to kill again. When we return, we'll delve deep into the life of Rentokil and examine the forces at work in his formative years, his family background, his failure as a street criminal, and the time he spent in Australia's hardest prison.
Prisoner 3.
Welcome back to Tough Nuts, Australia's hardest criminals, and the story of Christopher Dale Flannery, the man called Rentokil. Chris Flannery was born in 1948 and grew up in a tough patch in the working-class Melbourne suburb of Brunswick. His father, Edward, was unable to hold down a job, drank heavily, and was abusive to his wife and children. When Flannery was just 9, his father left the family home, never to return, leaving Flannery and his two older siblings with their mother, Emily, and Flannery's maternal grandmother, Mary. Flannery despised his father for leaving his mother high and over her children's heads. Edward Jr. and Louise managed to overcome their hardships to become positive contributors to society. Ed Flannery became a lawyer and Louise a nurse. However, Emerged from prison a psychological time bomb, full of anger and contempt for authority. After the break, we explore Rent-A-Kill Inc. And Flannery meets the one person who can control him.
Darling.
What now?
Give us a kiss, will ya? Be good, darling.
Welcome back to Tough Nuts, Australia's hardest criminals, and Christopher Dale Flannery, the man called Rent-A-Kill. Chris Flannery left Pentridge Prison, having served 5 years of his 9-year sentence. He fell into the arms of Kathleen, a young woman with a child from a previous relationship. Chris and Kath had met years earlier, but his time in jail had put their relationship on hold. Towards the end of his incarceration, Kath wrote frequently to Flannery, and within 6 months of his release, they were married. The newlywed Flannery found employment as a bouncer at Mickey's Disco, a Melbourne nightclub. The nightclub was a gathering place for many underworld figures of the day, and Flannery quickly found his wife Mickey's in 1974, and though he escaped a jail sentence, 6 months later he was arrested and charged for an armed robbery. He absconded while on bail and fled to Perth, and while on the run, Flannery found the only gainful employment of his life, working at the menswear counter at David Jones in Perth, a job that suited the vain killer down to the ground. Former acquaintance of Flannery's, Craig Cousin, recalls Chris and his vanity. most grisly crime was the double murder of Terence Basham and his de facto Susan Smith. Basham was a former painter and docker who Flannery had known from the old days in Melbourne. He had fallen out with his drug-dealing mates who gave Flannery a call. And so Flannery turned up on Basham's doorstep.
Mate, it's a beautiful place. You've done very well.
Yeah, cheers.
Here she is. Cheers and kisses.
Yeah, Chris.
Christ, Terry. You've spawned, son.
Sarah.
Ah, she's a little beauty, mate. Yeah. Thank God she hasn't got your looks, eh?
Huh. I live for her, mate. We both do.
We need to do a bit of business, mate.
Yeah, I was wondering why you...
Abandoning a 2-year-old girl after killing her parents was an appalling act, but Flannery would go a step further when he attempted to kill a serving New South Wales police officer. Undercover detective Michael Drury had been involved in a drug investigation which led to charges being laid against a drug dealer and mate of Flannery's, Alan Williams. Williams tried to buy himself out of trouble by attempting to bribe Drury. When that didn't work, he called on Flannery to kill him. Drury was shot twice in the kitchen of his Sydney home in front of his 2-year-old daughter. On the verge of death, Drury made a statement that Roger Rogerson had offered the bribe on behalf of Williams. The shooting of a policeman was a Kath and their children in the driveway of their Sydney home. This attempt on his life would throw his volatile personality into overdrive.
Nah. Fuck you. Chris. Chris. Hey.
Chris!
Hey.
No!
Welcome back to Tough Nuts, Australia's hardest criminals, and Christopher Dale Flannery, the man called Rent-A-Kill. In 1985, Sydney's streets were awash with blood. A new criminal outfit led by Barry McCann had commenced a war for control of Sydney's rackets. 3 weeks into the new year, an attempt was made on Flannery. were closing in. When we return, we reveal for the first time the answer to who killed Christopher Dale Flannery. Welcome back to Tough Nuts, Australia's hardest criminals, and the story of Christopher Dale Flannery, the man called Rent-A-Kill. The investigation into the shooting of New South Wales police officer Michael Drury gathered up ahead of steam. The investigation was initially hampered by corrupt police, who spread the word that Drury himself was corrupt. But that wouldn't fly. The corrupt cops knew that Flannery could give them all up. Flannery was caught in a maelstrom of his own making. George Freeman and his team, who had kept him on side, now feared him. They knew that Flannery's very presence stood in the way of establishing a lasting peace with the up-and-comers McCann's gang. In February, Flannery's old mate from prison in Melbourne, Mick Sayers, was murdered by 3 gun took evidence from over 400 witnesses, but could only conclude that Chris Flannery was murdered by person or persons unknown on or around the date of May 9th, 1985. Just who did it has remained one of the great mysteries of Australian criminal history until today. Recently, a significant player in the Chris Flannery story has revealed to Tough Nuts that Flannery was murdered in or around George Freeman's home the day he disappeared, and that his killer was Stan the Man Smith. Tough Nuts has checked into this account with a number of other sources who have agreed that Smith was indeed Flannery's killer. Stan Smith was a significant criminal figure in Australia who trafficked in drugs, yet he could always be called upon to do the business. He is believed to have killed more than a dozen criminals, those like Flannery that stepped out of line and threatened the livelihoods of the established criminal network. The powers that be in Sydney decided that Christopher Flannery should go for the sake of peace. In a funny kind of way, the man who killed for a living was himself sacrificed so that the business of crime could go on. See you next time on Tough Nuts, Australia's hardest criminals.